The standoff between the government and the Reserve Bank of India continues. This morning, the Indian Express reported that the government is seeking 3.6 lakh crore in reserves from the central bank. That may be proved to be the most contentious issue between the government and the Reserve Bank. To discuss this ongoing tussle and the way forward, let's welcome in former Finance Secretary S Narayan, and he joins us on the phone line from Chennai. Ms. Narayan, thank you so much for joining us today. Firstly, what have you made of this standoff? This is not the first time that there has been friction between the government and the central bank. Why has this flare-up, become so aggravated, almost to a point of no return?
These are all your views. So aggravated, point of no return, etc. I would not like to comment on that. But let's take the issues. The Reserve Bank is responsible for monetary policy, interest rates. And now we are getting into a situation where actually, I would say, a little bit of tussle is happening about fiscal management, in the sense that government is struggling to meet its fiscal deficit targets for the current year, and it is looking at these funds available with the RBI as a source of a measure to meet these fiscal deficits. Now, the problem with this is that the Reserve Bank is saying that this is not any income. This is not any addition to any income. So, therefore, in a way, you are actually increasing your borrowing without actually showing it in your budget. So in a way, you're not handling the fiscal deficit. You're just moving it from one table to another. So this is the argument that the Reserve Bank is putting forward, and I think it's a very, very fair argument that the Reserve Bank is putting forward on this. And touching the Reserve Bank surplus, I don't think it has ever been done before. And therefore, this particular measure, I think the government should think very, very, very carefully before asking for this kind of money from the Reserve Bank.
Good afternoon, Mr. Narayan. This is Ira joining in. I'm just going to take that point on the reserves a bit forward. It seems a little short-sighted that just to meet the fiscal deficit of 3.3 or not allow it to expand, even in the worst-case scenario to 3.7, you would take an extreme measure as to dip into the reserves. There have been committees which have laid out the adequate level of reserves, or at least the prudent level of reserves. Why is it not feasible for a relook at that construct, perhaps through a committee?
No,
why is the government in such a hurry?
No, most certainly. I totally agree with you. If you think a particular level of reserves maintained by the Reserve Bank is overly conservative, and they are actually providing much more than that is required prudently for the management of the economy or the growth of GDP, then in that case, certainly there's an opportunity and come back to it and say, okay, we'll take a lower number. But instead of doing that, to create a situation where ad hoc there's a command to the Reserve Bank to cough up the reserves, I think it would serve a very, very wrong international signal at this particular point of time, saying that the government is actually running out of options in managing its fiscal deficit.
The other bone of contention, Mr. Narayan, has been on this whole PCA, prompt corrective action. The government believes that lending restrictions that have been placed on some of these banks need to be relaxed because it will facilitate credit flow. The RBI believes that these banks need to get back on their financial health before, therefore it justifies these restrictions. Where is this debate headed?
Again, I think for quite some time, a number of people have been trying to say that please separate those issues which are I would say policy, like the power sector. A lot of issues are policy related, availability of coal, availability of power purchase agreements, etc. But there are a lot of other cases where there's been probably fraud, or there has been overdrawal of funds. So please separate these issues and allocate funds for sectors where you really need that growth is required urgently, like the road sector, transportation sector, etc. So I think it's a pity that in so many years, this kind of this kind of fine distinction has not been drawn And simply to say prompt corrective action against all withdrawals, I think here perhaps the Reserve Bank also needs to step back and say that, can I make it more nuanced? Can I make it business by business, sector by sector, or can I make it industry by industry? And put a considerable responsibility on the government to sort out policy options in those cases where it is policy options which is holding up the business. Yeah.
Dr. Ran, so like you said, in some issues, people think that the RBI and their stance is correct. In others, people argue that, perhaps the RBI could be, a little bit more conciliatory in their approach. But it now looks like it's all headed down to the board, which has created sort of another level of problem, because it then brings into play old established traditions of the fact that the board is just advisory, does not take decisions. Should that get challenged this time, Dr. Ryan? How seriously would you see it?
You see, I have been on the Reserve Bank board for, more than a couple of years. I think 2-3 years I was on the board. The board of the Reserve Bank, it's not like a corporate board. It does not take operational decisions. It just takes large decisions. It doesn't take operational decisions about how much the money, because let us take the interest rate. Interest rate is decided by the Monetary Policy Committee. Earlier it was there, that was not there. It is the Reserve Bank and the Deputy Governor. Now there's a Monetary Policy Committee. So in similar sense, for example, foreign exchange rate, the buy-sell operations, whether intervention operations, that's not decided by the board. So the board is in a way, yes, advisory in terms of the larger direction of the economy. So for the board to intervene in the operations of the Reserve Bank, to my mind, is again not a very healthy step.
And if it comes down to, say, a vote or a directive under Section 7, Dr. Ryan, I think it's now been confirmed that at least they've sought consultations under that section, which itself is, not something that has happened in the past. But if it goes a step further and the board takes a direction or a Section 7 directive is given, what do you think the implications would be? And it's not just for the institution, sir. Surely people on the outside are looking in to see what this means for the economy.
Two parts. First of all, to start consultation, a letter under Section 7 is not required. Why don't they go ahead and consult? Again, you don't require, and there's a letter, please come and consult with me. In fact, I do not know about the individual personalities in this particular case, but I remember that in our time, I used to fly across to Bombay to consult with the Reserve Bank Governor, with Mr. Bimal Jalan was there at that time, on any issues which the Finance Minister or the Prime Minister found it important. So it is not necessary that I will call them over, they must sit across the table, they must come to me. I don't understand this kind of, for me, I don't understand this kind of approach at all. You phone up, consult, if there are issues there, put forth the government point of view. And there are issues. There is also a very important thing. The access of the Reserve Bank government to Governor, to the Prime Minister's office is extremely important, because then only the Prime Minister gets to hear the picture which is non-North Bloc point of view. And I think somewhere this is missing at this point in time.
Sir, for the standoff to end, who do you think should be calling whom?
I think the Prime Minister should be calling the Reserve Bank and getting to know what the Reserve Bank's point of view is first. I think this is very, very important at this stage. And then only he will be able to take a view, because unfortunately, currently the Prime Minister's office does not have economic experts. So he should listen to them directly.
There is a Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, Dr. Narayan. I'm not sure whether they have any role to play in this.
I don't know what they are doing. Honestly, I don't know what I have not seen any output from them for some time now.
Okay, but sir, would it be fair to say that for the economy, a far worse scenario, or the worst case scenario would be a governor stepping down on a standoff like this?
You see, the economy will kind of balance itself. Don't worry about the economy. Because people come, people go. Okay, Raghuram Rajan suddenly was asked to go. Okay, economy took it in its stride. But much more important, what I am worried about is the international perspective. How will the rest of the countries view this kind of action? It has never happened in a liberal democracy anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, no, that's not what I meant, sir. How does the world see us, and what happens to the currency?
And that, if they lose faith in that institution or the ability of the government to deal with autonomous institutions, I think we are in for trouble. Just to give an example, suppose government were to start giving directions to SEBI and say do this, do that, the entire financial market will collapse. So just think of that as a parallel alternative.
All right, sir. Thank you so much indeed for taking our call and giving us a perspective. Thank you and happy Diwali to you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.